She called me a dinosaur, right there in front of the new kid and the whole maintenance crew. My name's Tom Carver. I'm 57 years old, senior maintenance technician at Daugherty Industrial Components in Mansfield, Ohio. 28 years, I've kept that place alive. When machines coughed, I made them breathe again. When production lines stuttered, I tuned them like an orchestra. I started there when the paint on the walls was still fresh, before the offices had windows, before half the people in that building were even born. And today, I was told evolution had passed me by. The word hit harder than I expected. Not shouted, not whispered, just said, like a diagnosis. Dinosaur. Aaron Daugherty's voice carried across the concrete floor, clear and cold. She was the kind of boss who treated eye contact like combat. Mid-30s, all confidence and theory, MBA from some place that probably didn't smell like machine oil. Her lipstick matched the hazard lights behind her bright red. Attention-seeking, I'd watched her walk into that office 6 months ago, daughter of the founder, armed with spreadsheets and big talk about modernization. I didn't mind change. I'd lived through 5 management shifts, 3 downsizings, and 1 full automation overhaul. But this was different. This was personal. The new kid, Tyler, I think froze beside the press, a wrench still in his hand. Nobody spoke. The machines hummed. The air hung heavy with coolant and silence. Erin crossed her arms and smiled like she was doing me a favor. We're moving in a new direction, Tom. It's time to make room for fresh talent. She gestured toward the mezzanine, where her niece Kayla stood pretending to read a clipboard. 23. Business degree. Nails too clean for this place. Kayla's taking over your position effective immediately. I know you'll make the transition smooth. The crew looked anywhere but at me. They'd seen what happened to men who argued. You didn't win. You just gave management another reason to call you angry. So I nodded once. Slow. The way you do when a verdict's already been read. I wiped my hands on a rag and said, "Guess extinction finally caught up." Erin's smile flickered. She liked control, and calm men made her nervous. "You'll get 2 weeks severance," she said, adjusting her blazer. "And you can finish out the day cleaning out your station." "Appreciate it," I said, even though I didn't. I turned back to my toolbox. The handle was worn smooth from years of use. Metal corners dented from a lifetime of impact. Every scratch told a story. Late nights, breakdowns averted, overtime no one thanked me for. I started packing in silence. Behind me, I could feel the crew watching, like they were afraid to blink. Tyler finally broke the stillness. "Sir," he said quietly, "you don't have to." "It's fine," I told him. "Machines need younger hands anyway." I heard Erin's heels clicking away across the floor, echoing off steel beams. When the sound faded, the air seemed to deflate. The men went back to their work. Slower now, like the heart had been pulled out of the room. At my locker, I found the photo taped inside the old crew from '98, standing in front of the first automated line we ever installed. We looked like kings back then, grinning through grime and sweat, proud of something we built with our hands. Half those men are retired now. 2 are dead. I folded the photo carefully and slipped it into my pocket. Outside, the afternoon sun hit hard against the metal siding. The plant loomed behind me, a giant animal breathing steam, indifferent to the men who fed it. I loaded my toolbox into the bed of my truck. As I shut the tailgate, I heard someone call out from the loading dock. "She's gonna regret that," one of the younger guys said. I didn't answer. Words like that were for people who believed the world corrected itself. I'd seen enough to know better. The world doesn't fix what's unfair. You just learn to live with the break. I climbed into the driver's seat and sat there a long while. The radio was off. The smell of grease still clung to my hands. Through the windshield, I watched the plant lights flicker on one by one as dusk rolled in, yellow squares against a gray sky. For the first time in 28 years, I wasn't part of that glow. I turned the key, but didn't start the engine. For the first time in 28 years, The machine wasn't the only thing she'd shut down. The first week after they pushed me out felt like standing in an empty factory with the power off. My hands didn't know what to do. Every morning I'd wander out to the garage, run my fingers over the handles of wrenches and screwdrivers like they were old friends I hadn't said goodbye to properly. I'd built half my life around the rhythm of tightening bolts, checking pressure gauges, and listening for the faint hitch in a motor's hum that no one else could hear. Now, the only thing humming was the fluorescent light above my workbench, and even that had a flicker I couldn't fix without feeling like I was stealing from myself. My wife's been gone 8 years. Cancer. The kids both moved out of state, one in Texas, one in Michigan. They call sometimes, text mostly, but life keeps them busy. The plant was what kept me from feeling like the walls were closing in. Every clang, every hiss of the compressors, every late-night repair felt like a conversation I understood. Without it, the silence was too clean. On the third day, I started checking the local paper online. They were running stories about Dougherty, industrial again, delays in shipments, defective parts, customers threatening to pull contracts. Aaron was quoted twice, talking about legacy inefficiencies and outdated systems that required modernization. Those words were aimed straight at me, even if she didn't say my name. I knew what she was doing. Blame the man who couldn't defend himself. Rewrite the story before anyone else could. Thing was, I knew that system better than anyone alive. I'd seen it survive floods, brownouts, supply shortages. I'd patched it with scrap metal and faith more times than I could count. I'd pulled 12-hour shifts when the power grid failed, kept production running on generator fumes while management slept. I didn't need a headline to tell me when something was wrong. I could feel it. A memory came back to me one afternoon 5 years ago. Lightning hit a transformer behind the plant. Whole place went dark. Aaron's father, old man Dougherty, had been pacing his office like a caged bear, while I crawled through wet concrete tunnels, rerouting circuits. We had power back in 4 hours. He shook my hand the next morning, called me the backbone of this plant. Aaron must have forgotten that when she took over. Friday night, the phone rang just after dinner. Unknown number. But I answered anyway. Tom? It's Mike. I hadn't heard his voice in months, but it still carried the same nervous edge. Listen, you didn't hear this from me, but she's running your old line at double speed. Ignored the maintenance schedule completely. The bearings are running hot, man. Something's gonna blow if she keeps it up. I didn't say much, just listened while he talked himself into silence. When he hung up, I sat there staring at the phone like it might tell me what to do next. Around midnight, I found myself behind the wheel, without deciding to be. The roads were empty, the kind of quiet that makes your own engine sound too loud. I parked a block from the plant, killed the headlights, and watched from the service road. The place glowed like a steel cathedral, floodlights bouncing off the rain-slick pavement. I could see the silhouettes of workers moving behind the high windows, the faint flicker of sparks from the welding bays. My line was running. I knew the sound slightly offbeat, strained, like a runner breathing through a cramp. I sat there for a long time, the steering wheel cold beneath my hands. That building was more than concrete and pipes to me. It was a heartbeat I'd kept steady for nearly 3 decades. Now it was pulsing too fast, out of rhythm, like a heart begging for failure. They called me a dinosaur. Maybe they forgot dinosaurs ruled this earth once. A truck passed on the highway, its headlights washing over the windshield for half a second before leaving me in darkness again. I didn't move. I just watched the plant, the glow of it cutting through the fog, like something alive. Somewhere inside, a pressure gauge was screaming in silence, and I could almost hear it. By the time I drove home, the twitch in my hands was gone. Something colder had replaced it. A stillness, a focus, a plan was forming. Aaron's face popped up on my phone before sunrise, framed by the polished steel backdrop of the plant floor. She was standing in front of line 2, That smug grin of hers plastered on LinkedIn for everyone to see. Modernizing outdated systems, the caption read. She'd tagged Kayla, of course. The golden niece, the prodigy, the next generation leader. The comments were full of digital applause. People I'd trained. People who knew better, cheering on the same woman who'd gutted the heart of the place. I scrolled through it without blinking. The more she bragged, the quieter my anger became. It was settling into something denser, colder, like oil left to congeal in an idle engine. In one of the photos, a worker stood behind her, holding a maintenance log, just background noise to most people. But my eyes caught it immediately, a detail no one else would notice. The warning light on the control panel above him was dark. That light should never be dark, unless the safety interlock was bypassed, and only one person could have done that. Kayla. She must have thought the system was slowing production, so she'd switched the circuit off completely. For efficiency. For progress. I stared at the picture longer than I should have. My thumb hovered over the screen, tracing the lines of the machine I'd helped build 20 years ago. I could almost hear it humming, the old hydraulic rhythm buried beneath the automation software. When we designed that system, Aaron's father had pulled me into his office and said, "Tom, this plant is my family. I'm trusting you with its heartbeat." I'd spent months drafting those blueprints by hand, eating dinner over graph paper, running calculations in my head while I shaved in the morning. Every wire, every safety valve, every shutoff was placed with one rule in mind. No human ever dies in this plant. He'd believed in me more than anyone else ever had. When the automation system finally came online, he'd been right there beside me at midnight, both of us covered in grease and coffee. "Looks like you've built yourself a legacy, Carver," he said, clapping my shoulder. I'd laughed back then, proud in a way that didn't need words. I never imagined that legacy would one day become a weapon in someone else's hands. Now I looked at Erin's glossy smile on my phone screen and thought of how her father used to walk the floor, sleeves rolled up, talking to welders by name. He'd trusted men, not machines. Erin trusted algorithms and people who looked good in meetings, and she'd given control of the plant's brain to someone who didn't even understand what a pressure differential meant. I closed the app and stared out the window of my garage. The rain had started again, tapping soft against the tin roof. Somewhere out there, Line 2 was running without its failsafe. That line was moving twice the intended speed, bearings running hot, hydraulics overpressurized, interlocks dead. It wasn't progress. It was a loaded gun. For a few hours, I tried to let it go. I told myself it wasn't my problem anymore. Let them crash. Let them learn. It sounded like the kind of man who stopped caring about the difference between justice and apathy, and I wasn't ready to be that man yet. By mid-afternoon, I found myself driving across town to see Marvin Ellis, my old lawyer. We'd served together on the local safety board years ago. His office smelled like paper and dust, the air too still. He looked up when I walked in. "Tom Carver, haven't seen you since your retirement party that never happened." I handed him the LinkedIn photo on my phone. "Tell me something, Marvin. When they fired me, did they ever file the transfer paperwork for system oversight?" He frowned, adjusted his glasses, scrolled through a few digital folders. "Well, I'll be damned," he said finally. Clause 14b, subsection 4. Until formal transfer and audit sign-off, you remain the designated emergency custodian of plant control systems, meaning, legally, you still have clearance. Aaron must have missed it. So if something goes wrong, you're still accountable, but you also still have access. He leaned back. "Why? You planning to do something?" I shook my head, just planning to make sure no one gets killed. When I got home, I went straight to the closet where I'd kept my old blueprints rolled tight, edges yellowed, ink fading but still legible. The smell of graphite and old paper hit me like a memory. I laid them out across the workbench, tracing the wiring routes with a fingertip, reminding myself how it all fit together. Then I found the key card tucked inside the front cover, still wrapped in its cracked leather sleeve. I turned it over in my hand, feeling the faint ridges of my engraved name. Tom Carver, Emergency Systems Lead. I didn't want revenge. I wanted balance. But sometimes, they're the same thing. The storm rolled in, from the west, like a black tide. Low clouds crawling over the rooftops, the kind that swallowed the horizon whole. Rain drummed against my windshield in hard, uneven rhythms, the kind that makes you think of clockwork wearing itself down. Across the street, Doherty Industrial burned with light. Flood lamps cut through the rain, machines roaring inside, a wounded animal forcing itself to run. They were pushing through the night, desperate to meet the orders they'd promised, and couldn't fill. I sat in my truck, engine off, wipers ticking just enough to keep the view clear. The glow from the building painted the wet asphalt orange. It looked almost alive. Inside, I imagined the scene clearly. I'd lived it too many times not to. Kayla would be pacing the mezzanine, tapping her tablet with shaking fingers, trying to sound like she knew what she was doing. Aaron would be barking orders through the radio, the sound of control panels chirping warnings she didn't understand, rising around her. Somewhere in the background, the engineers would be muttering about pressure readings and thermal spikes. But no one would stop the line, not with the boss screaming, "Push through the error codes! We can't afford another delay!" I opened my laptop and waited for the old program to load. The blue glow of the screen reflected off the raindrops, clinging to the glass. My access credentials hadn't expired. They never would not until that transfer clause was filed. I typed slowly, deliberately, every keystroke a breath. The remote maintenance terminal blinked alive, the same interface I'd built back when Aaron's father ran the place. I could see the readouts in real time. Heat levels climbing, pressure valves compensating, bypasses still active. The interlocks were dead, Kayla's handiwork. I didn't touch anything at first, just watched. The data rolled across the screen like a heartbeat, jagged, irregular. She'd overclocked the system beyond safe parameters, weeks ago. Every safeguard I'd designed had been silenced by someone who thought they knew better. I remembered the night old man Doherty had told me, "If those interlocks ever fail, shut the whole thing down. Machines can be rebuilt. People can't." That line stuck with me as I navigated the code. I didn't sabotage anything. I didn't change a single value. I simply restored the original operating protocols, the ones meant to protect life, not pride. In seconds, the system responded. A low alarm triggered deep in the network, followed by a cascade of auto-locks. On the monitors inside the plant, red lights would be flashing now, emergency stop warnings scrolling like wildfire. The line would be freezing mid-cycle, hydraulics locking, belts seizing. I could almost see it through the rain. Workers stopping mid-step, confusion turning to panic. Somewhere above them, Aaron would be storming into the control room, heels clicking like gunfire, eyes wide and furious. She'd be shouting, demanding to know who authorized the shutdown. Then she'd see the command line, the old one still stamped with my technician ID from decades ago. Her rage would hit like lightning. I knew her type. Pride before logic. She'd grab the manual override key, the one Kayla probably told her never to use. She'd slam it into the console, twist, and override every safeguard I'd just restored. In that instant, the system would surge, power rerouted, hydraulics pressurized beyond their limits, the machine trying to reconcile chaos with control. The sky outside cracked open with thunder. A bright pulse flared through the factory windows, followed by darkness. Even from the street, I could hear the metallic groan, the deep rumble of a giant giving up its fight. Sparks climbed through the vents like fireflies. The hum of machinery died all at once. I leaned back in the seat, watching the steam rise into the rain. No one was dead. The sensors I'd left in place made sure of that, but production was finished. Millions in damage. Every lie she'd built about modernization, efficiency, progress gone in a single night. Lightning flashed again, catching my reflection in the glass. I didn't look angry, just still. Machines don't lie, I said quietly. People do. I logged out, deleted my access credentials, and wiped the terminal clean. No trace. Just a man in an old truck, sitting in the rain, watching smoke dissolve into the storm. When I finally turned the key, the engine started without hesitation. The sound was steady, honest. I drove away slow, headlights cutting a narrow path through the dark. The satisfaction in my chest wasn't bright or burning. It was weight, solid and unmoving. Justice didn't need noise. It just needed balance. The aftermath came slow, like thunder rolling in after lightning. The papers called it the Mansfield shutdown. Bold letters splashed across every local headline. Reporters stood outside the chain-link fence, holding umbrellas, talking about industrial collapse and management negligence. The official report said the safety overrides had been disabled for months. Investigators found emails, warnings ignored, memos deleted. Aaron Doherty was fired within a week. The board called it leadership failure. Her niece Kayla resigned the same day, citing health reasons. The company's stock dropped 17% before lunch. They tried to spin it as an accident of circumstance. I knew better. 2 days later, I got a call from a number I hadn't seen in years. It was corporate HR, the same voice that had thanked me for my service when they'd escorted me out. She sounded softer now, almost apologetic. Mr. Carver, the board would like to offer you a consulting position during our insurance recovery phase. No obligations, of course. Just to help get us back on our feet. I could hear desperation under her politeness. I'm not interested, I said. There was a pause, then the faint sound of keys tapping. You're certain? It's a generous offer. Double your previous rate. I already gave them 30 years, I said. That's enough charity for one lifetime. I hung up before she could finish her sentence. That night, the news replayed drone footage of the plant blackened metal, twisted into shapes that no longer made sense. A factory turned graveyard. I watched the clip twice, then turned off the TV. The silence afterward felt heavier than before. 2 days later, I drove out to see it for myself. The security gate was open, chain dangling uselessly from one side. Nobody cared to guard what was already dead. The yard was littered with rusted bolts, broken glass, fragments of conveyor belts that once carried a city's worth of work through its veins. The air smelled of rain and burnt plastic. Every step I took echoed like a memory. Inside, the hallways were lined with soot, the walls peeling from heat. I could still trace the paths I used to walk every morning, past the compressor room, around the loading docks, through the corridor, where the vending machine used to buzz like a lazy hornet. In the corner of what used to be my maintenance bay, I found my old locker still standing. The door was dented but unbroken. My nameplate T. Carver was covered in dust but legible. I opened it slowly. Inside was my coffee mug, the one with the chipped handle, and the wrench I used every day for 2 decades. Same weight, same scratches. They felt smaller in my hands now. On the top shelf was a folded piece of paper, yellowed at the edges. My first employment form, signed by Aaron's father. His handwriting slanted but steady. Welcome to the team. I smiled once, small and tired. Then I closed the locker and walked away. I didn't take anything. I'd already taken what mattered. Outside, the sky hung low and gray. The sound of machinery was gone, replaced by the wind scraping through the skeleton of what used to be my second home. I was halfway to my truck when I heard footsteps behind me. Aaron's voice came next, hoarse, fragile, the kind that used to command but now just pleaded. Tom. I turned. She looked different. The perfect posture was gone. Hair matted from rain, mascara streaked like she'd been crying for days. You knew this would happen, she said, voice trembling. You let it happen. I studied her face for a moment. The same eyes her father once had. Only his were steady. "No," I said. I knew what happens when people ignore warnings. She broke then, shoulders shaking, eyes closing, as if the truth itself was too heavy to hold. I left her there, standing among the ruins she built, and kept walking. The redevelopment team was waiting at the edge of the property, a row of men in yellow vests, setting charges along the foundation. I stood by my truck and watched as they gave the all clear, the sound of the countdown swallowed by wind. When the plant finally came down, it wasn't loud the way I expected. It was deep, resonant like judgment itself finding its mark. Dust rose in slow motion, spreading across the skyline like smoke from a finished war. They called me a dinosaur. They forgot what happened the last time one ruled the earth. The echo of the collapse carried for miles. I stood there until the last bit of dust settled, then got into my truck and drove toward the horizon. The gavel had fallen. Nothing more needed to be said.